very excited to interview you. Just for the record, for a while, Nabil's like, oh, I'm going to get John Ramdeen to come here and do some sports commentary. And he's finally delivered because you're here. So I think Ottawa Fight fans are happy and excited to have you commentate here at Heroes Combat League. First question I'd like to ask, I need to know your opinion on the Conor McGregor incident, as I'm sure you're tracking like crazy.
Yeah, well, Conor continues to do what Conor does, and that's garner attention. The guy hasn't fought in mixed martial arts in 500 plus days, and all he does is he shows up and he creates attention. And a guy that I'm not going to say he was out of the spotlight, but the UFC seemed like they wanted to move on with Khabib, with Max, with Brock Lesnar, whoever they have, because they realize that they can't rely on this guy. And he comes in, and yeah, there's a bunch of lawsuits, but let's say Conor pays out $5 million, $10 million, it's probably added $50 million to the next fight that he has.
So, in your opinion, John, is this overall potentially a positive? Can they pivot out of this in a positive marketing value-added way? Is that how you're?
The reality is this: we are not covering bingo. We're covering a sport where people get kicked in the head and punched in the head, and there's alpha males and alpha females, and sometimes things are going to happen, and this is one of those things. It's unfortunate. I'm sure the UFC is furious about the fact that Michael Chiesa and Anthony Pettis and Ray Borg, 3 fights are pulled off the card because of this incident, throwing this dolly situation. And I know Conor's opinion is, I was there to back my boy. I was there to support Artem Lobov because I saw that Khabib's team, they were harassing him, they were bullying him, right, and I needed to watch this guy's back. Was it the right move? It depends on who you're looking at, because if you're Conor, yeah, you might have to pay a few $1 million in lawsuits, but I really don't think it's going to hurt his bottom line.
It's not, eh?
No.
But what about his brand? Because obviously he's involved now. He's got that entrepreneurial spirit, and he's trying to push, and he's a huge draw, obviously, for many fans and potentially many businesses. Is this going to impact his entrepreneurial?
I guess it could. I guess you can compare it to, anybody that decided to jump on the Conor McGregor bandwagon for sponsorship or whatnot. If you didn't know what you're getting yourself into, you should have done your research. I can understand if this was a situation where, like Tiger Woods, where Nike or some of these big companies have invested so much money, and it just came out of the blue that this guy's damaged his reputation and done this and that, so you have to pull sponsorships. Or John Jones, the same situation. Conor, you knew this was part of the appeal. This is why people wanted to jump on to the bandwagon, because he says whatever, and as soon as he walks into a room, everybody pays attention to this guy. So I really, it's one of those things that, should he be doing this stuff? Absolutely not, because it looks like he feels that he's bigger than the sport.
Sure.
But when you have that type of clout, and you have the financial backing, and you have a vast support system, the reality is he's polarizing, which means there's a divide. Half the people love him, half the people hate him.
Which is awesome for business, right?
For business.
Yeah.
And that's what it comes down to. He understands it, and he seems to be capitalizing on it.
Totally. Now, you've been, you are the leading voice, in my opinion, and just about everybody, when it comes to mixed martial arts in Canada. You've been involved for quite some time, and you've been consistently at it, researching and adding your value and your spin to the game. Speak to us on the state of Canadian mixed martial arts. Now, you're announcing on TKO, for TKO with Robin Black. What is the current state from your perspective and point of view on Canadian mixed martial arts?
What's interesting about it, I actually think we're at one of the, I'm not going to say high points, but there seems to be a real light at the end of the tunnel. If you look, you go back the better part of a decade ago, it seemed that Canada was what they called the Mecca of mixed martial arts. There was all these great promotions, whether it be TKO or Instinct out of Montreal, and the MFC coming out of Western Canada, King of the Cage. Constantly there'd be promotions popping up, and so it seemed to be healthy. And then it felt that after the UFC started buying up all these different promotions, whether it be Strikeforce or Pride or the WEC, that they wanted to make mixed martial arts their own thing. And it seems that now that is not the case, because people are starting to realize that, oh, wait a second, I thought the sport was the UFC. It's like, no. The sport is mixed martial arts. They were just a brand. They were the NFL of mixed martial arts. But it seems that stigma is changing too. And when you have people that, have never been to an event like Heroes, they come here and they witness the show and they see these young athletes and how dedicated and how talented they are, they realize, wait a second, I don't just need to love the UFC. I can support my local guys, and it's almost more enjoyable for them because they know these guys.
Sure.
Now, when you look at the big stage, you almost don't know who anybody is. You know a handful of fighters, unless your job is to study the card from top to bottom. But the game has changed to the point where I think it's going to support the grassroots level of mixed martial arts.
Oh, you think it's going back to that model?
I really do.
What indicators tell you so?
Well, I think that there was a break during, especially over the last number of years. As I mentioned, the Maximum Fighting Championships out of Alberta and TKO out of Quebec, and the plethora of shows that they had going on, they were dealing with a bunch of issues, so these shows went away. Now you're starting to see them come back. And you're starting to see people rallying behind their local fighters, and you're starting to see a lot of grassroots promotions get the support that they need. I mean, just look at this beautiful venue that we're in. You're seeing sponsors, you're seeing people get excited about it. But like anything, Rome wasn't built in a day.
Right.
So it just comes down to the commitment level of the promoters and the fighters, and trying to understand the symbiotic union between all parties, and that's the only way it's going to grow.
Now, John, as far as current mixed martial arts competitors in Canada, in your opinion, who are the top 3 up and coming names? And I know it's a big question that we should be tracking and watching closely. I know most of them are probably at TKO because it's made a major comeback, right? But who, in your opinion, the top 3?
Well, I would say, and I think you're right. I think TKO is, one of the things that's interesting about TKO is, their matchmaker and the guy in charge, Stefan Patry, been around the game for a long time. If you know his history, was the former manager of George St. Pierre. But it's beyond that. The one thing that Stefan Patry does very, very well is he has an eye for recognizing talent, and I think. And he does the work. It's not just about talent. It's about characters that can sell a fight and look good doing so. So I think there's a couple of his guys that, the last show I did, there was the battle for the 125-pound championship, and this kid from London, Ontario, originally from Calgary, now living in London, Malcolm Gordon, became the inaugural 125-pound champion, joining his coaches and teammates, Mark Hominick and Sam Stout, who were also TKO champions, and his teammate Jesse Ronson, excuse me. But it was the guy that he lost to, actually, that I think is one that we need to keep our eye on, this kid, Jordan Graham. He only had 2 or 3 professional MMA fights, but he's had like 50 Thai boxing fights, and I see the Loyalist MMA guys here, and that's his team. And if you just see how calm he is inside of the cage or inside of the ring, it's just really awesome to watch, because any aspiring martial artist, that's the goal. Get yourself to this comfortable state where you can just be free to express the dangerous art that So he's certainly one that I've got my eye on. From the Great White North, but of course the 145-pound champion TJ Laramie is a guy that I think a lot of people are talking about. And there's also the guy that the UFC just cut, Joe Munier, who is supposed to be making his TKO debut sometime in the future. But actually, above those guys, there's also another TKO champion, Marc-Andre Barrio, Power Bar.
Oh yeah.
He doesn't have the glitz. He doesn't have the glamour. I don't want to sound negative here. There's nothing super sexy about this guy, but he knows how to get the job done. He knows how to fight. His record is awesome. He's had great fights. He's learned how to deal with, some of the chaos that goes on inside of the cage and ring. And I think because of that, this is a guy that can fly under the radar, just focus on getting himself better as a mixed martial artist, and I think he'll surprise a lot of people when he goes to the UFC, because I think he will go.
Yeah, and he has that desire to train and,
Yeah.
and compete. Like he's got that in him, you know.
does.
And I don't think you can teach such dedication and fire. Now, as far as you've been involved in the sport for quite some time. What is it about? Two-part question. Does Canada still have that reputation it had, as you mentioned, about a decade ago, this country being, surprisingly a big exporter of high-level mixed martial artists? Does this country still have that reputation? And B, how has, in your opinion, you're obviously well aware of amateur mixed martial arts being banned here in this province for just a little over a year. How has that impacted the community?
Well, I think to me, it's one of those things that continues to baffle supporters of this, because it just doesn't make sense. When I look at combat sports and you see some of the things that are allowed, whether it's boxing is allowed or kickboxing is allowed, and then they ban certain things, yet the rest of the province is on board, it just feels like it's a step backwards, because you can have a professional organization, but you can't have the amateur system in place to feed these professional organizations the right way. And the only way to do it, in my opinion, is to do it the right way, to have the amateur ranks. And everything needs to be consistent, because it isn't consistent. If you go to Michigan, for example, if you go to Detroit and you're involved in an amateur mixed martial, it's professional over there. So you go over there, if you can compete and you can survive, you're ready for the big show. But that's not the case. If amateur, there's kids that have been training martial arts and want to just test themselves. Am I ready for this level of competition? Do I belong at the pros? So it's supposed to be a jumping off point. So when it comes down to amateur mixed martial arts, I want to see it grow across the board, but it has to be consistent. And I think that's part of the problem, is that they just don't have enough experts that are giving their opinion. I don't know when it comes to government what can be done, because it really feels like they want to fight this.
Right.
I mean, the same thing is happening in Quebec as well. So it just, like anything, it comes down to time, and it comes down to having the right people fight the right battles. And it feels like it is. It just, again, time.
Fair enough. Going back to TKO, John, what has the revival of TKO, that brand and that team, what has it done to the Canadian and international scene? Because it's on Fight Pass, right?
And that's the biggest thing about it, is that it is attached itself to the Ultimate Fighting Championship, which is the big brand for a lot of these young fighters. So, their goal, if you're training in martial arts and you say, you know what, my coaches tell me I'm good, I really want to maybe take it to the next level. It's like, okay, well, where do I go? I'm 10-0 as an amateur. Well, you can go and sign with Promotion X and try to get a bunch of wins there. Or you can go fight for this one promotion, TKO. They have a deal with the UFC. People tune in, they see you. Somebody gets hurt, you just don't know. You could be fighting in the UFC 3 or 4 fights after fighting in TKO, where it could take you a lot longer if you're fighting in smaller promotions that have no connection to the Ultimate Fighting Championship.
What's it like working with Robin Black?
He is just one of the best people to work with. He and I are, we're not just co-workers, we're very close friends. And as a matter of fact, I was with him last night. We're drinking beers and sharing stories, and just trying to make sense of what was going on with Connor. Is this intentional? Is he doing these things on purpose? And Robin's just one of these guys that is just so dedicated to mixed martial arts enlightenment for the audience, because the reality is, if you are not submerged in this lifestyle and you're just an onlooker, I could understand how it might not be everybody's cup of tea. But that's only because they're looking at one aspect, the aspect of somebody's punching somebody else and somebody's getting hurt. But sometimes they miss after these two athletes smash each other for 3 rounds or 5 rounds or whatever, that a lot of the times afterwards they go and they hug each other, and they show the mutual respect and honor and discipline and all the positive things that are involved in martial arts. And it's one of my favorite reasons to get to work with Robin is we both share that same love of martial arts and combat sports. And I think we grow off of each other, and the amount of things that he's taught me in this game has just been absolutely phenomenal. And he's blazing his own trail as well. So I just I wish him nothing but the best.
Now, as far as the journalism and comms aspect of the job, you guys play an integral role in telling the story as far as the fighters, the competition, so on and so forth. What's, in your opinion, from your experience, what's one of the most misunderstood roles or misunderstood points of views in regards to being someone, a sports commentator, involved in a generally accepted violent sport?
Well, I think when it comes to it, you have to really define your own role, because a lot of people would consider me a journalist based on my 15 years in broadcasting, because I would tell stories. I would go and
sorry.
Sorry, yeah, sorry.
It's all good.
So the reality is that I would go and I'd tell these stories, and I would, break stories of George St. Pierre and Michael Bisping.
Right.
But that's not really what we were in it for. We were there to be friends with the martial artists and really get an understanding of who these, because people just look at them as they're kind of pieces of meat just going in to hurt each other. And they have families, and they have stories, and they have goals, and they have, aspirations. And to me, that's what I feel that it is our responsibility to show all sides of things. I had a chance to talk to former UFC champion Jens Pulver one time, and one of the things he told me, he said, I have a fight coming up on Saturday. And he goes, but I wake up on Wednesday, and it's the best I've felt ever. And I pray, why couldn't the fight be today? I've never felt this good. Let's hope I feel this good on Saturday. And then Friday night, you try to go to sleep. You can't go to sleep. When you do go to sleep, you wake up with a kink in your neck, and you don't feel as good as you did on Wednesday. And that doesn't change anything. You still have to go and fight. You still have to go fight if you get divorce papers.
Wow.
You have to go and fight if your kids are sick,
Sure.
or if your dad is sick. Jake Shields, he had to go fight Jake Ellenberger 2 days after his dad died. His dad was his best friend.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
to be able to explain those stories to the public, because they, like me, have never been in there. So they just think that these athletes are puppets, and I think the more important thing is to realize how amazing it is that they're not puppets, that they're human beings like you and I, and this is what they've chosen to do with their time. To me, is absolutely amazing.
How did you get your first, how did you get involved in the sport? And what's it been, how would you describe the last 15, 20 years that you've been involved in this?
Well, I went to school for film and television production.
Where did you go?
To Trebas in Toronto.
Okay.
It's just one of those things that...
Travis Institute.
Yeah, Travis Institute.
I don't. Why are you smiling about it? What's? Tell us.
Now, I don't want to say anything bad.
Is it negative?
Yeah.
It okay. Sorry, I thought you had an inside joke.
It really just wasn't, what I was looking for.
Okay. What were you looking for?
Just not that. I think what I've learned about this industry, the only way you can learn it is by doing it. Just like a lot of things that,
Sure.
You go to school for this and that, but, people don't tell you, well, you have an interview scheduled at 1 o'clock. Nobody tells you, well, that interview, you could be left there for 9 hours.
Sure.
Waiting for Damian Maia, which happened to me.
Wow.
I'm waiting. I saw Damian, he comes in, he's, oh, can we interview? Yeah, I'll be down in 2 minutes. 4 hours later, he's still not there. I just saw him. And then his teammate, Babalu, comes down. Have you seen Damian Maia? Oh, yeah, he says he's going to be just down. We waited 9 hours, and he didn't show.
He didn't show.
He never showed. So, and again, that was at the very beginning of my mixed martial arts broadcasting career. So it's one of those, like, wait, nobody told. I had planned stuff after that. So part of the hurry up and wait. These are all things that you learn on the job, where you expect to be able to do something, and it's like, what? Well, there's no Wi-Fi here. Well, what do we do? Well, we have to go to the Apple Store because we got to transmit to send back to the studios in Toronto because they're waiting for this thing, and we're in Las Vegas. They just sent us there.
Wow.
So it's stuff like that you're not prepared for. You come out of school and you're confident that you can handle things, and then again, the true nature of the job rears its ugly head, and you have to try to make sense of it. So I think that's you start there, and Fight Network was one of those places. You start in this industry, and you get to grow with them, but there's all these. They're making it up as they go as well. So it's been a lot of fun, but there's been a lot of headaches, but it led to something great for me. To be able to call TKO on UFC Fight Pass. One of the reasons it's a dream come true is I used to buy those DVDs. You've been a fan. I've been a fan for a long time. Before Fight Network launched, I owned these UCC TKO DVDs.
Wow.
And I remember at the Fight Network launch party, they had a couple of the fighters from UCC TKO. Justin Bruckman was one of the guys who fought George St. Pierre for the title. And I'd go and I'd get pictures. Okay, can I get a picture with you? He's like, sure. And then we became friends after that and had this great relationship. And, he's held pads for me. And it's just to be able to, live my dream, because I've always been a fan of martial arts, and to get to interview Conor McGregor and George and Dana White and some of the big players in the game. It to me, it's just a dream come true.
John, who's your favorite interview? Who do you really enjoy interviewing, and why?
I think there's two athletes, because I was never one. I wasn't a particularly big fan of theirs in the early stages. Was Matt Serra. He just seemed super arrogant and just like a loudmouth. And if you watch the season of The Ultimate Fighter, when he and Matt Hughes were coaching, I don't know, he just seemed to have this "I'm the man" attitude. So when I had the opportunity to interview this guy, I went in knowing that, and he just is the friendliest, nicest, jovial. His story's awesome. He loves comedy, so he doesn't take himself too seriously. And he really just changed my opinion of him. And ever since that day, I always root for Matt Serra, because he treated everybody around him like gold. Like he didn't disrespect a single person. And the only other person I could say that was warmer and a bigger surprise was Wanderlei Silva.
Really?
Because you see Wanderlei Silva, especially the way the guy fights and what he does to people. He has this terrifying aura around him. And it was the same thing. Jokes and happy. And
when you say terrifying aura, did you feel scared around him a little bit?
Yeah, because you know what the action. And again, this is not. Rory McDonald told us this. He's like, it's mixed martial arts. It's not tiddlywinks. Right. So Wanderlei Silva's taken a lot of punishment. His head is, and you can't deny certain things. And when a guy has been in those type of wars, you just never know when he's going to snap at something. And for him, for me, when he came in, it's like, yes, you can feel Wanderlei Silva's presence in the room.
Right.
And then he starts patting people on the shoulders and he starts cracking jokes. And it's like, wait a second, you're supposed to be the terrifying guy.
Yeah.
And then you realize, the axe murder is a persona. This is a father.
It's a gimmick.
It's a gimmick.
And it sells, though. It draws. Sells. It's good for business.
And that's part of, you say the word gimmick.
Oh, but you know what I mean.
No.
I say that with respect.
The reason why I like that term is because there's a lot of naysayers out there, deniers, that do not understand that mixed martial arts is closer to pro wrestling than people want to believe.
Sure. Yeah.
And look at Conor.
Yeah.
Like the reality. Look at Brock Lesnar was their champion.
Yeah.
Ronda Rousey was their champion.
Yeah.
If you follow the roots of mixed martial arts, you can trace it back to catch wrestling or that strong style of professional wrestling. And I like it. I think, gimmicks are key because it creates interest. And when interest is created, there's bigger paydays. And when there's bigger paydays, the fighters are treated better.
Totally.
So
it's really interesting hearing all this, because you have such insight on the scene, be it in Canada and internationally. And I remember watching recent TKO about maybe 6 months ago, where Stranya Gavrilovic, after I think
Joe Valet.
Yeah. And I remember you listening to that and watching it, and your reaction to it was like, oh wow, you got hot, like you snapped on that, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
Because it was blatant.
Yeah.
Right.
It seemed that way at the time.
Yeah.
But one thing is, I like to look at all sides, and for anybody that has not seen the incident, Stranya knocked Joe Valet down and kept hitting the guy, even though the referee was on his back pulling him off. Now, I was disgusted by the act. I thought the guy should be banned. I told everybody that.
Right.
If he came to me, I would have told him that myself.
Sure.
And I was out with a former TKO champion that night, and one of the cut men for the UFC, and one of the top coaches in our country, certainly. And he is an official as well. And he said, I think you're a little hard on Stranya, because you have to remember, and he pointed this out, and for a lot of the broadcasters or journalists out there, they simply can't wrap their head around the idea of there's fighters that are getting ready right now, as we're in this venue, that have to go into kill mode.
Sure.
Which means that they're in the back thinking, I have to smash the person that's standing across the cage or ring from me. That's just a reality, because I'm not getting hurt. So when you have a guy like Stranya, who is that type of person, who needs to get amped up, it's the responsibility of the referee to always be in that fighter's sightlines. Because, the coach, he brought this up to me. He goes, Stranya knocks this guy down to the ground, and he is in full kill mode. And some referee that puts his hands on his shoulder, Stranya is probably not even feeling that.
So true. Yeah.
All he's thinking about is smash, smash. I can't feel if somebody's tugging on him. It's supposed to be the referee's job to have eye contact, and if he needs to, he dives in between these two.
Right.
So I feel that when I reviewed it and talked to an intelligent minds about it, I think they swayed my opinion. Now, they didn't fully sway my opinion, because you still have to have some sort of control. You are aware that there's a third man in there. This is a sport. Somebody is supposed to stop this fight. So I do think that he should take some responsibility, but it really isn't black and white, and I know a lot of people feel that it is.
Sure. No, and it's interesting to hear that background, and the fact that you asked fellows be it coaches and referees and so on for their opinion on it. With Stranya, I think he's in my opinion, I think he's one of the most interesting, charismatic, and I hate to say this, but almost underrated fighter and persona in Canada.
I have to agree.
He has so much charisma.
Yeah.
And he can draw an audience. And I've seen him fight and interview. I've interviewed him before he crossed over to TKO. And the guy has that persona, he's got. And anyways, all this to say, I mean, you're right. These athletes are combat sports athletes, and they have to get into the mind of killing. Well, not killing. Let me retract that. But you know what I mean. They have to get in that zone.
Go to any martial arts gym where they produce fighters. That's the way they talk. They have to be aggressive. Nobody actually means when a coach says you got to go over there and kill that guy. Nobody means you have to end their lives.
Right.
But what it means is, we all know what that means. You have to take this person out. You have to hurt them because you know what their goal is? To hurt you.
Right.
So you have to do it before they do it to you.
Right.
And a lot of these fighters get into that mindset, and they just can't get out of it until their arm is raised.
Right.
And So when it comes to Stranya, I just think that he needs to balance everything because, there's been failed tests.
Right.
There has been this situation where, a referee, he got suspended because of it. And that just doesn't look good for bigger organizations that may want to sign this guy. It's
Sure.
like, oh, yeah, I like the look. I like the way he fights. But, oh, wait, he's done this. He's done that. Let's just move on. Let's find somebody else.
You're saying reputation management is a very important thing for these fighters. Is that what you're? Yeah?
I agree. And I think so because as much as it's interesting to do it on the small stage, you want to create the interest at the big stage. You want to get to the big stage.
But John, do you think these fighters that you see at TKO and so on and so forth, do you think they get that aspect of the formula? Everything from self-promotion to reputation management?
Not all of them. And that's part of the problem. It depends on what your goal is. There's a friend of mine who fights in the UFC, Mitch Gagnon. I'm sure you know the name. One of the top 135 pounders this country has ever produced. An incredible martial artist in every sense of the word. Incredible human being. This guy is not going to sell one pay-per-view. He's not going to, because he does not talk the talk. He does not have an understanding that this is not just martial arts. This is sports entertainment.
Amen.
And
you tell them these things.
yeah, we tell them.
Yeah,
we have to tell them.
Yeah.
And then you see a guy like Jesse Arnett, for example, who has just run with it. I don't know if you've seen Jesse Arnett, but
he's also from.
He now fights for TKO.
Yeah.
But he beat Dimitri Wardenberg just beat this kid, and I love Dimitri. He's a phenomenal martial artist, and Jesse, I think.
He's got the call to the UFC, but
he's turned it down,
right?
Because he understands that a lot of these fighters are pawns. You're a pawn until you can make money for the UFC, and they called him and they wanted to give him a contract for 145 pounds. Jesse's not that big of a guy.
Right.
Jose Aldo was the 145 pound champion. He is enormous. So
how big?
Jose Aldo probably walks around somewhere around 180 pounds.
Jesus. Okay.
So during his, because he's jacked up, right? So there's all those things where Jesse doesn't do that. Like you see Jesse's frame, he's small. Yeah, he might fight at 145 pounds, but 2 days leading up, he might weigh 138 pounds. He's not cutting weight for 145 pounds. You probably got to add weight to make that.
Sure.
So when it comes to Jesse, he understands if you just make it undeniable, work on your skills, because he's never going to neglect any of his martial arts training to go and work on how do I sell myself more. That comes afterwards. Let's just say there's 10 hours in a day. You go and you dedicate your 8 hours to martial arts, and then you have 2 hours to go work on the other stuff. And that's what Jesse's done. He's garnered a lot of attention. This is a guy, I think he started his career at 4 wins and 4 losses, and then went on a 15-fight win streak and hasn't lost since, or 13 fights or something like that. And he is arguably Canada's most talented, unsigned, big-name fighter, because I think he can compete with... I watched him, actually, I called his fight for Z Promotions out in Lethbridge or Medicine Hat, and the main event was for the Z Promotions Fight Night title, and he fought Johnny Bedford from The Ultimate Fighter. And I got a chance to hang out with Johnny Bedford, and this is a guy who is from Ohio, so he knows how to wrestle, and then moved to Texas, and he's just a gritty, scrappy, hard-nosed fighter, and those two beat each other for 25 minutes. And when I saw that, and I saw the type of fight that Jesse Arnett was in, and how he smiled the whole time, I'm like, he belongs in the big show. Like, sure, he's getting paid for this, but these aren't the type of fights that you want to be, sure, you're making 10 grand or 20 grand or whatever they paid him, but he got punched in the face, and he got kicked, and he got hurt. And some of the less established promotions, you want to get as much money as you can to fight the least qualified. Jesse doesn't want that. He wants the toughest, most available fighters from all over the world so he can show everybody that he's the best. And I love that confidence, and that confidence only comes from somebody that puts the work in.
There's a lot of attrition rates in these sports. Obviously, it's a combat sport. People get injured. But head trauma and concussions and so on and so forth are running rampant in mixed martial arts and other combat and contact sports. What are your opinions on this? And as a communicator and broadcaster, do you think you have a role in, because you know some of these people personally, I would imagine, to tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, man, like...
Yeah. It's funny that you say that.
I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, no, not at all. You were asking me earlier about who are some of the up-and-coming fighters that I like watching, and I mentioned the one kid, Jordan Graham, from Loyalist MMA. And before he fought for the title, he fought one of Canada's other certainly one of Ontario's up-and-coming kids, Tony Laramie. And Jordan Graham wrecked this kid. Like, Jordan's, I think, in his early 20s, and Tony had spinal injuries because of this fight. And that was upsetting to me. This is an 18-year-old kid.
He had spinal injuries because of
spinal injuries because of this fight. Jordan Graham hurt this kid. And so when I saw the kid's dad, I saw Tony's dad afterwards, I'm like, you got to take him out of the sport. Like you don't want this to affect the rest of your life. Hey, I love this. I want to watch every single day, but not if it affects the quality of your life. And I understand it's going to, because one of the things Vanderlei Silva told me, that he understands the price that he paid, which is he's paid with his brain. He goes, but that's what I am. I'm this, and the only way the damage is done. So if I want to continue to get $1 million paychecks, I got to put my brain up for rent, so to speak. So I feel it is my responsibility, but the lucky thing is we're all individuals and we get to make our own decisions. And as much as I can be an influence and I can make suggestions, it's one of the things I love about these fighters. You have a spine issue and it's like, oh, it's just a setback. It's like, whoa, I can't wait to see this guy fight again. So they just have, most of these fighters, especially are the ones that manage to get themselves to that next level. They have this intangible, this ability to get through things that most people walking the planet just can't get through. And it's a lot of the wrestlers that I've personally been exposed to. Wrestling just teaches you this level of toughness and grit and the ability to deal with the worst case situations and teach people, men, women, kids, how to get past that. And that to me is just a super powerful thing, because if you can take that into your everyday life, that's just such a strong tool to have.
So this weekend, we've got four. We've got Heroes Combat League here.
Of course, I'm excited.
San Marco in Ottawa. But this weekend there's also the UFC going on. There's also a Freestyle World Cup in Iowa, I believe. That's freestyle wrestling. And we've got WrestleMania.
Yeah.
Now, out of those three events, which one do you think is going to garner the most attention in North America?
Well, I mean, you're talking.
I guess for you, which one will you be watching closely?
The reality is, and I've said that a lot. My reality is, I grew up. One of the reasons why I'm a big mixed martial arts fan is because they present things like the WWE.
Right.
And I grew up as a professional wrestling fanatic. I absolutely loved the way they presented things. I loved the characters. I loved the gimmicks. I loved all of that stuff, because at some point we all realized it wasn't real.
What are you talking about? It's not real.
Well, when I say that it's not real, because people jump on that. People say, oh, it's so fake. I'm like, I think you're watching for the wrong reasons. I said, well, you have to understand. I said, when these guys fall through the ropes onto the ground, yeah, sure, it's been predetermined, but I'd like to see you fall through the ropes onto your shoulder. That pain is not fake. Right. That is real pain.
Take the bump.
That's it. And people don't understand the bumps. The bumps hurt. I have tons of friends that have been part of the wrestling world for years and years and years, and these people are all injured because of broken collarbones and busted up backs, and because there's some botched spot that doesn't, and somebody gets hurt because of it. So, and I think that the WWE's model and what they've been able to do for the past 40 some odd years has been simply remarkable. And because of that, and especially that, Max Holloway is now out of the main event. It's now for UFC 223. It was supposed to be Tony Ferguson and Khabib. Tony Ferguson's out. Max Holloway steps in. Max Holloway doesn't get cleared. Max Holloway's out. Now Ally Aquinta's in. Now Pettis is off the card. Chiesa is off the card. Ray Borg's off the card. And Max Holloway's off the card. So when you look at that, and you have an amazingly run organization like the WWE, and it is their Super Bowl. This is what they focus all year on, is this event. How is it not going to be the biggest one?
What do you, if you could advise WME IMG, if they brought you in as an advisor, consultant type, what would you tell them in terms of forecasting the future of mixed martial art, the UFC brand? What do they need to do in order to keep growing audiences and keep customers and fans engaged?
I think one of the things they need to do is they need to make it fresh. I think they have to understand that I think when WME bought the organization, they believed that the star was those three letters, the U, the F, and the C. And you're not going to have a product unless you have the stars to drive those three letters. So they have to do something interesting. And one of the things I thought is a lot of these fighters that fight in the UFC, they came from different organizations. They came from different cage sizes. Some of them fought in rings. Some of them prefer that. So I think if you were to take the UFC Presents Pride Fighting Championships and have some sort of, or Strike Force, UFC Presents the World Extreme Cage Fighting, where you have Donald Cerrone, you have Carlos Condit, you have Jose Aldo, some of these guys that fought for those organizations, and make it like their Super Bowl. Again, I'm not saying that's the be-all, end-all, but I think just make it fresh, because based on what I'm hearing from people, it just feels stale. There's nothing that really gets people excited. Yes, you throw Conor McGregor in there, everybody's going to get pumped up. But like I mentioned before, the guy hasn't fought in 500 days. But
he's still hot. I mean, he's still on fire.
He is on fire. And he's on fire for what, though? With the last time we saw him has been 2 years inside of the cage.
Right.
He somehow managed, an 0-0 boxer, somehow managed to talk his way into the most lucrative boxing match in history against one of the most decorated fighters in combat sports history. Shocking that he was able to do that. But he did do that, and what it did is it loaded his bank account, and we're just not sure if he's ever going to come back. So if you don't have Conor, Ronda's gone. We don't know if George is coming back.
But they got Brock.
Lesnar. They said he might be coming back.
Yeah. What do you think about that?
I love it because people look at Brock as, oh, Brock's this just fake wrestling guy. The guy was an NCAA wrestling champion.
Right.
People say, yeah, but I understand. Does he have the technical abilities of a Jordan Burroughs? Maybe not. People say, well, he just barreled over guys. Well, that. You bring what you have. And he brought what he had, which was size and power, and he got himself an NCAA championship with it. And because of that lucrative contract with the WWE, and then people laughed when he said he wanted to make his way to the Ultimate Fighting Championship, and he beat Randy Couture, one of the greatest fighters in the history of fighting, for the UFC championship. And he didn't dodge anybody along the way. He fought Shane Carwin, who kicked his ass early. He fought Frank Mir. All amazing fighters. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. You got punched in the guts by Alistair Overeem. He got smoked by Cain Velasquez, but he fought nothing but tough guys. And Brock Lesnar, because of that, is the man. If the UFC can get this guy back on their roster, I say do it, because people want to watch this guy fight. Give him a smart fight. And I think if the UFC doesn't do something drastic, Well, they're already in trouble. There's no mystery that the numbers on Fox weren't what they wanted. Apparently, this $400 million that they're asking for the licensing fee, they're apparently not even going to be offered half of that. So, because of all these things, the UFC is not that shining brand it was, 5 years ago, where it was must-see TV for people.
Yes,
People are like,
yes.
you know what? I can miss this one. I can miss next one. And to me, that's terrible. So they got to try to figure out something that is shiny and new and sustainable, so that people will make their promotion, their sports organization, a destination for life.
How do you keep track of all, so there's so many events, as you mentioned, right? Different promotions in North America, worldwide, so on and so forth. How do you personally keep track of all these leagues and different combat sports? What's your secret?
Well, really, it comes down to, you have to do research. You can't just buy into somebody's presenting you with something and says, well, this is the world's best. I'm like, according to who? According to this piece of paper that says it's the world's best?
Sure.
I could believe that, but it's now my job to say, well, you're selling me this fighter who is 8-1. Okay, now let me look at this, so I can just take that for face value. This fighter has beaten 8 people and only lost 1 time. That sounds like a great record. But what I would used to do is, and I would, introduce this theory to my friend John Pollock, who worked at Fight Network as well. You just go to SureDog and you click on this guy's record and you see who he beat. You say, oh, so that 8-1, those 8 wins are against losing fighters. None of those guys that he beat have winning records.
Right.
Which tells me, okay, he hasn't been in tough fights. I would rather have a guy that has a record of 4 wins and 5 losses, all against stiff competition, than I would have somebody that's 8-1 who's fought nothing but bums. So it's your job to, or depending on the situation, if you're interested and you want to pursue broadcasting, you want to, I'd love to, get myself into the UFC and get an understanding who these fighters are, you just have to spend the time. If you have to spend the time doing the research, and then you have to watch the fights, because you have to see can they bring the goods, because, and so many people do that. They say they're sports fans, but they just look at the results. Well, this guy knocked out that guy. It's like, yeah, but the other guy was kicking his ass for literally 14 minutes.
Sure.
There was a knockout. That's one of the amazing things about this sport, is you got 15 minutes or 25 minutes to win the fight, and you can have your ass handed to you for most of those rounds. But if you find your way, you can come out on top. And that's the problem with the paper results, is that you don't get to see the whole story. And the only way to see the whole story is to tune in.
Well, you're a very passionate person when you're communicating what's happening in the ring, in the cage, and even in this interview here for people who are watching. Obviously, this is an This is an audio interview. It's a podcast interview, but you're very animated and you're genuinely having fun.
Yeah.
What does it all mean to you, being involved in these sports, especially from the Canadian context? You've been involved since, it's fair to say, since the beginning of the rise of mixed martial arts in Canada. What does it mean to you personally?
Well, it's just it's a real honor to be a part of something that's growing, and to see athletes that I called their first fight when they were 0-0, and to watch their journey to get to the Ultimate Fighting Championship, where they end up getting money and they can build a life and they get married and have kids, and they do these things where, I'm not saying the fighting, you're always going to get that from fighting, but just to be a part of their journey and try to explain to people, all the different elements because in my opinion, it's not just one thing why people tune into MMA. And I know a lot of people may think that they're just tuning in for violence, but once they're shown, I guess another analogy would be, growing up, I wasn't a wine drinker. I thought it was disgusting. And then somebody, actually it was my mother, she bought me a book on on how to appreciate wine. And it gives you the description. Oh, you're able to taste these fruity notes or citrus or this or that, and how to do it. And then one day I'm like, all right, I'll try this. Like, oh my God, I actually can taste vanilla.
Right.
So I didn't know how to do it before.
Right.
So once you're shown things, you can start appreciating things more. And I think when you appreciate things, there'll be less of the booing. The fight goes down to the ground. And I understand it. I love Thai boxing. I love Thai boxing. I love jiu-jitsu. And if you're to ask me, well, what do you want to see? I'm like, I want to see somebody punch and kick each other. But that doesn't mean that I don't want to see Damian Maia do his jiu-jitsu stuff, because I actually love that stuff. But people that didn't have experience with jiu-jitsu before, and they're like, I just don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And then, well, that's a closed guard. So, oh, I know what he's doing. And you've seen it. You're seeing more and more people, a fight goes to the ground, and then there's a sweep or something. The crowd goes crazy. Oh, that's great. That means things are evolving. The audience is evolving. They're embracing the fact that it's not one thing. It's a whole bunch of different things. And I think when you can do that, you're going to open things up to enjoy the sport a little bit more.
What in your opinion is going to be the most forecasting ahead 5 years from now? Do you think MMA is going to have a bigger audience than it does now, or potentially a smaller one?
I think that might be a loaded question, depending on where you are. For example, if you go to Poland, the KSW organization, if you haven't seen KSW, tune into KSW. They just won Sports Organization of Poland.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
holy moly!
And this is a company that does better numbers. They pull in 7 million viewers, better than World Cup numbers in Poland for this KSW promotion.
Do they run monthly or
they run like 5 or 6 times a year?
Okay.
And they put in 70,000 people into a stadium.
Wow.
It's huge, and their production's gorgeous, and they absolutely get it. And then you look at One Championship or One FC or whatever it's called in Southeast Asia, which is Rich Franklin, former UFC middleweight champion, and Matt Hume, one of the pioneers of mixed martial arts, and they're doing their thing. I feel that once China, once some of these Southeast Asian countries, India, once these countries that have a history of combat, once they get themselves organized, and once they start showcasing their own talent, you're going to see a massive spike in mixed martial arts globally. Maybe
will that include the UFC brand though?
I don't think so. I don't think the UFC is that interested in building their brand globally. I think they initially were. I think this new WME, I think even though they're holding shows where the market's strong. They can go to England because they have British stars.
Sure.
But I feel that it almost seems like what they want is to be the NFL.
Right.
They want to be that on North American soil. They want the UFC to be the destination for combat sports fans every Wednesday and Saturday nights. I just don't know if it's possible. I just think that people are, as I mentioned before, they feel that the product is stale and they need to do something different. Where the rest of the world, they are doing things different. They aren't doing the same thing that the UFC is doing, and because of that, they continue to grow.
Do you think we'll ever see Fedor Emelianenko in the UFC? Is that?
I don't think that. I think, especially now when he has the relationship with Scott Coker and the guys from Bellator, they've got their heavyweight tournament still, working. Matt Mitrione beat Roy Nelson, and now the next fight, and this is a fight I've been dying to see for years, was Fedor and Frank Mir. So, I wanted it to happen in the UFC. I wanted it to happen in the UFC years ago. It didn't. It's happening now. Are both guys in their prime? Absolutely not. Both guys are masters of martial arts. They understand. They have spent so much time inside of the cage in the ring that it is home for them. And to be able to watch these two masters at their craft do their thing is super exciting. It's exciting because you get to see these guys that have blazed trails. And on top of that, before you get to that main event or that co-main event, you get to see some of the rising stars, some of the talent that they're building. And that to me is part of the whole package is that when Bellator presents some of these aging guys, whether it be Chael Sonnen or Rampage, they're also showing the next generation, the Aaron Picos or the Rory McDonalds of the world. So I think that's it's key. I think that I just love real fighters, and both Frank Mir and Fedor are real fighters. They're not just looking to stall out a victory and lay and pray or whatever. Frank Mir really believes in his mind, if he can, I will rip your legs off if I grab a hold of them. And I believe that. I believe that when Frank Mir goes into that battle mindset, he's there to kill or be killed, whereas Fedor's super calm, cool, and collected until the ref says go, and then that switch gets turned on, and Fedor, just like Conor always tries to land that straight left hand, Fedor tries to land that missile of a right hand. And when he does, most people fall, and they very rarely get up. But, it would have been nice to see Fedor against some of in his prime, against Cain Velasquez and against Brock and all these, and Stipe and all these guys. Just like anything, there's a lot of these former champions, they get past their prime and they lose a couple of fights, and then everybody jumps off the bandwagon, and that's just part of the game as well.
Professional sports. Now we're here at the Sala San Marco in Ottawa for Heroes Combat League, and we're going to be commentating together. What are you looking forward to seeing tonight?
I love Thai boxing. I just love the art. I think it's amazing in all forms. Whether it's modified, whether it's traditional. I think what's great is you're trying to find that perfect balance of what works with amateur and when you have a pro-am event, and just seeing the growth of these youngsters. Is there somebody on this docket, on this fight card, that is going to make an impact? Are they going to,
an impact tonight or
an impact tonight?
Okay.
The impact starts tonight. If you can somehow get the people in here thrilled about your performance, they want to come back to see you again, and then that adds pressure. It's the athletes that can take that pressure and run with that pressure. That's what I'm looking to see. I know Stefan Lamarche. I've called the guy's fights. The guy is tough as nails. The guy has fought multiple UFC veterans. He belongs in there. So who else belongs in here? What are these young athletes that feel like this is my home? Because there's athletes getting ready right now that are sick to their stomach, that are trying to bail, that they want any reason. No, that's a human reaction. Most of us would feel that way. But there's some back there, we hope, that are like, I can't wait to do this. This is what I was put on earth to do, and nobody is going to stand in my way of me doing my thing. And that's what I'm excited to see.
Very cool. I'm looking forward to commentating with you. Thank you very much for this interview and your time.
It was absolutely my pleasure, and anytime.
Thank you.